Yeah, if this doesn't take, then it's, I'm just going to go pull out my pubic hair in the other room.
Well, let's do that off mic and off cam.
Carl Anderson.
Oh, Lance Roylo.
How's it going?
Are you kidding me? If it got any better, I would have to throw this entire podcast microphone out the window and just go with it.
It's pretty dramatic.
It is because, once you've reached a place where you're like, you know what? There's nothing left. It's been so good. What are you going to do? So I'm glad we're all here. And Dan Fullick, Dan, do you want to just give us a little brief synopsis about you and your life and, how you came to be in Hawaii and working for one of the preeminent liquor distributors in the country?
Thank you, Carl. Thanks for the throw. My name is Dan Fullick, and I manage the fine wine portfolio and fine wine sales team for Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits of Hawaii. I'm speaking here today as myself, not as a representative of that company. Okay, I don't want to go to HR. Also, I've been with the company 5 years, and I've been in this position pretty close to a year and a half. And in that job, I manage the portfolio, which means I select what we will offer to sell. And then I also manage the salespeople that go out there and sell the wine. We sell exclusively to retailers and restaurants. We do not sell to the general public. We are licensed as a wholesaler only. And Southern is the largest wine and spirits wholesaler in the United States. We operate, last check, about 45 states we operate in. But we started, close to 50 years ago in Florida.
Have been doing this for quite some time. I know that we were chatting about how we first met, and you were a little boutique wine distributor selling to my restaurant in Chicago. What made you transition from, radio over to spirits and wine?
Well, thank you, Carl. So interesting is I was in the music business for the better part of a decade. And in my 20s, it was great. And I was always in what we called the promotion department. So it was my job to put songs on the radio. I did that in the Midwest, and then went to Chicago and went to New York and had a national position with Virgin Records as director of Top 40 promotion. Excuse me. And then during that time, the music business changed very quickly. And honestly, excuse me, I'm sorry. Hang on. The music business was changing as the consumer shifted from physical purchases, CDs, to digital purchases. And what we saw is very quickly the acceptable price point for our product go from $16 to $0. And that,
Jeez.
Yeah, that really ruined the fun. So at the time, I was working for Virgin Records in New York, which is owned by EMI, a British company. And overnight, EMI corporate in London decided to merge Virgin Records and Capitol Records. And with that, my entire floor, all of us got laid off. And I was 30 years old. And it was right at this would have been 05.
Uh-huh.
So okay. Is this the beginning? Is that the beginning of Spotify, or what took you guys out, really?
It was Napster was the beginning.
Napster. Yep.
This was still in those days.
Yeah.
And file sharing was really more prevalent, and iTunes was something new. It was this new thing, and this is pre-iPhone.
Oh yeah, because iPhone is 2007 or 8, right?
7.
Like that.
Yeah. So this was still the iPod days, if we can remember those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess when this would have happened, it would have been. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was 15 years ago. It was 05, 06, yeah. So at any rate, I was 30 years old. Talked to my wife. We have a nice little home in Forest Hills, Queens. We're thinking about starting a family. And the writing was on the wall for the music business, in my opinion. So we decided to make a transition. And I believe, at least for me, I believe that if you're going to put your best work forward with your employment, you should have passion and love for what you do, for your product. And I looked at what else do I enjoy. I love music. I love radio. I've always been a passionate radio listener. But what else do I love? I love wine. And I decided to make that transition. So I started working at a little wine store in Forest Hills, Queens, the Wine Room, it's called. And I worked there and learned a little bit about the business. And thankfully for me, the owner's husband was a big player in the wine wholesaling in New York City. And he got me started, showed me the ropes and gave me some details on how to get a gig in the business. And then I moved back home to Chicago and took a gig with a really small wine wholesaler with the dumbest name you ever heard, Wine-O-Rama. Absolutely ridiculous. And
you know what? When you say Wine-O-Rama, Dan, when you say Wine-O-Rama, it should come with the sound of a slide whistle. Right?
Yeah, it sounds like a D-Light song, right? Yeah, it's silly.
D-Light.
So, the listeners are falling asleep already. So I worked part-time for this Wine-O-Rama company while working full-time doing radio promotion for Universal Republic Records. And that was the last time I worked in the music business. And that's when I met Carl. Carl and his wife at the time, Lulu, had a cool little restaurant called Between on Division Avenue in Wicker Park. And they were nice enough to buy wine for me. They bought a lot of wine from me. and I learned a lot about just the day-to-day business. So, Carl, thank you for that part of that education. And here we are, 13 years later in Hawaii.
No.
It's great.
Yes. Yeah, no, thank you, Dan, because the one thing that I will always take from that whole experience is honestly, the people that we've met that you can't forget, like yourself, right?
Oh, very kind.
No, seriously. And, like I said earlier, you were always, Lance and I wanted to chat with you, when I would tell stories, and then that's how this podcast it was kind of born, we would just kind of sit around this table and just tell stories or, impart wisdom and knowledge and experience and ridiculous stuff to people who were there to just listen. And invariably, Dan, a lot of those stories revolved around that restaurant and wine and booze, right? So
you had some characters in that building, man. I still remember Isto.
Oh my God, yeah. I still see him once in a while on social media. Just it's like this. He hasn't changed at all, doing the same thing.
And then your chef Radhika went on to be on Top Chef.
Yes, and which is one of my stories as well, because even though I wasn't on the show myself, it was just drama on its own, trying to navigate what she was doing and all of the notoriety from that show.
And what happened with her? So going on years down the road, a couple years down the road, I started to call on the folks that owned Hubbard Inn and a few of those downtown restaurants, and they had worked for her. And I went in thinking I would have a shoe-in because I knew Radhika from your restaurant. So I walked in with my business card and my portfolio, eager beaver salesperson. I'm like, I know Radhika. Certainly you will give me an audience. And they said, oh, you know her? Well, let me know when you see her next because we want to call the police. And I'm like, okay. I'm going to try a different introduction next time. The Radhika Chronicles.
I don't know. It's to say experience is just it cheapens it. You know what I'm saying? It's like you kind of know a little bit about everything out there, but wine, out of all the spirits, that's your true, I guess, passion.
Yeah. I'm a wine drinker, a wine lover. I'm not a master sommelier. I don't pretend to be. I respect for those that have dedicated their lives to that pursuit. I'm not one of them, but I know my way around wine. And I know my way around the wine business a little bit. But, expert is a tricky word. Show me an expert, I'll show you a fool.
Who said that?
I did.
No, okay. No, it was like a P.T. Barnum.
No, a guy I worked for, Andy Pates, who co-owner of Cream Wine Company, one of the top independent boutique wine distributors in Chicago, would use that expression a lot. And I learned a great deal from Andy. And that's one of the takeaways there is, another thing he would say, which relates to this is, don't get high on your own supply, meaning, settle down before you fall down.
Yep. But no, and being here in Hawaii, it's kind of funny, being in the food and beverage industry in the Midwest where you think it's a little more robust, and having friends, who own restaurants, on the East Coast. I have access to more amazing chefs with more notoriety. And, I've already had numerous encounters with, the highest level sommeliers that there could be, right?
Because there's three in Hawaii, right? You got Patrick,
There's three,
Roberto,
three.
and Chuck. And there should be four, but he got
yes.
ripped off. He totally got ripped off, and that is a sham. And I will say this on record: the court should be ashamed of themselves. They allowed fraud, they allowed cheating, and they punished the people that were not involved. And
Dan, you're
wrong.
You're actually. I love this, but what are you talking about? And we need to know what happened.
So 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago, October. The test for the master sommelier is grueling. It is very difficult. There's 3 components,
yes.
And one of the components, which is the blind tasting, was compromised. Meaning,
how compromised?
One of the master sommeliers that was a proctor for the exam leaked the wines to some of the students. And that's my problem with the court. It is the curriculum and the testing is not structured formally, like, say, if you're going to take the bar exam.
Correct.
When you sit for the master, for the court of master sommeliers, that test is whatever those master sommeliers that are proctoring your exam thought to ask you. It's not standardized. So therefore, it can be compromised.
Oh, yes. And is there actual proof that the information was provided to the students, to the test takers?
Yes.
Oh.
And what the court did is they banned that particular master. I don't remember his name. He was in San Diego, SoCal somewhere. And he's banned forever. He's removed from the court and cannot use the word sommelier professionally going forward, which is tricky because the word sommelier is kind of out there, like engineer.
Right.
You could there's idiots running around calling themselves water sommeliers now. It's not regulated like to say doctor, for example, right? So at any rate, so this particular person leaked what some of the wines were going to be in the blind tasting component to some of the candidates, and it was found out. And what the court did is they threw out the results of the entire cohort. Young, sharp kid from Kauai, first generation American born. He's a fantastic guy, and he studied his ass off. Chuck Furia here in Hawaii was his mentor, and he had the highest score in his advanced test a year earlier of anyone that took it. And then a year later, he sits for the master. He passes, and then 2 weeks later, it turns out some other people cheated, and his master pin was revoked, was taken away. So imagine you sit for the bar exam, and someone you've never met cheats, and they take it away from you. That's wrong.
He can't take it again.
He has taken it again, and he hasn't passed. And think about the mental preparation for the biggest test you're going to take in your life. And the curriculum changes, or the testing changes every time. So you build up to that moment, and you put it all on the table. And it's so much of a mental thing. I think you could use. I hate the game of golf, but there's a lot of analogies there. Like it's a mental game. You know how to swing that stupid club, but your head gets in the way. He knows wine more than anyone I've dealt with in my life, and it was taken away. So I do not like how the court handled that, and I think it is a stain on their reputation.
Wow.
So Dan, could you walk us through what exactly does it take for that level 3? What are the steps? Like, what is it? Is it a 1 day thing? Is it a week thing?
Well, I don't know anything about it. Can we start at level 1? What is? I don't even. Yeah. So Dan, just to preface this, I don't know anything about wine. I watched Sour Grapes. I watched Bottle Shock yesterday, and I drink it, but I'm like, I don't know the difference between red and white. That's about it. So I know what a sommelier is. I just don't exactly know the levels and stuff like that.
Okay, so the Court of Master Sommeliers was born out of, I believe, an organization of butlers in the United Kingdom. And these are people that sought to formalize and elevate wine service. And it's really more service oriented than some of the other tracks you can take when it comes to the knowledge of wine. For example, to be a master of wine, that's much more academic. You're going to spend a lot more time writing and learning about farming and the tips and the regionality and the word that we use in wine a lot, which is terroir, which is a French word that we don't have an English translation for. But ultimately, it would be the sum of all environmental factors that would affect how wine will taste, from the soil to the wind to the duration of sun to the diurnal shift of daytime temperature and nighttime temperature, all the way down.
Wow.
In the Court of Master Sommelier, you focus much more on service and the concept of tipsicity, meaning if I pour you Chablis from this particular vintage, does it taste like Chablis from this particular vintage? Which would then say that the winemaker, the vigneron, could make changes or could have behavior in the cellar during the winemaking process that could rob a wine of its tipsicity.
Wow.
Does this also factor into how much a wine is costs at retail or perceived cost?
No, the in the court, again, it's that chase, that pursuit of tipsicity. So if I taste a wine blind and I say, and I can identify it as being, whatever it happens to be, 2015 Chablis, that means the winemaker has done his or her job correctly, has captured what that wine should be. That's the study. So you could then find a wine that is 2015 Chablis that doesn't taste like it, but that means the winemaker did something either in the vineyard or in the cellar to steer it that way.
So you're saying, there's a scene in Bottle Shock where they're hustling the people in the bar, but that guy Gustavo is able to tell when or what vineyard the wine was from and the year and all that. So is that what you're talking about? Like he can, if you're able to pinpoint it, that's what tipsicity is?
Exactly right.
Got it.
Yep. And that's what happened in this testing.
How realistic is that? Oh, so that's realistic. So there are people out there that can nail it down like that.
Absolutely. You should be a master sommelier.
That's very sad.
Yeah.
That's a talent.
It's an incredible talent. There's two movies about it. What are they called? Psalm and Psalm 2 in the bottle that follow these people during their lead up to their testing. And it is a 24/7 pursuit. This is no phony baloney. It is a full-time job plus to dial in your tasting ability to be able to do that. And it's not a party trick. I really do believe it as a talent and a learned skill. You need both. You need to have the talent to do so, and then you need to hone that skill like a Michael Jordan or whatever sports analogy. You have natural talent that your mama gave you, and then you need to develop it.
Wow.
Speaking of which, here in Hawaii, out of all of those four potential names, which one would be the LeBron of tasting wine?
I'm not going to go there, but I'll tell you this: the most influential, and I would say one of the most influential master sommeliers in the western part of the United States is Chuck Fruia, former partner in Vino and Sansei restaurants. And I'll tell you why. He was one of the first Americans to pass the MS test. Not just Hawaiians, Americans. And his influence
brought it home for the U.S.
Brought it home, and he's Hawaiian, and he's not white. That was, and I'll say it, that was a rarity. So here's this Japanese Hawaiian guy rolling up and very, very talented. And Chuck's, like I said earlier, the court is more focused on service as opposed to the academics. And Chuck is that person. His tableside manner and working with guests and talking about wine, he's never snooty, he's never hoity-toity, and he strikes me as someone who doesn't forget that it should be that of enjoyment. Enjoy the wine, enjoy your restaurant experience, and don't insult the guests. Don't make people feel like idiots because they don't know as much about wine that you do. Because guess what? You're a master sommelier. You know more about wine than just about anyone else walking down the street. So if you get joy out of making someone feel stupid, then you're an asshole, and you run into that a lot, and I think it's a problem for our business, where people are afraid to talk about wine because they'll be made to feel stupid, and that's wrong. Can you imagine you went in to buy a car, and the salesperson said, "What do you mean you don't know what rack and pinion steering is? What's your problem?"
That's true.
Are you kidding me? You know. So back to Chuck. Chuck is now retired from his restaurants and is still consulting and still is in the game. But now we're looking into a second generation of restaurateurs and wine stewards and sommelier candidates that he has influenced here in Hawaii that shape our restaurant scene, from the fine dining at Halekulani to the hipster joints in Chinatown. There are students of Chuck Furuya working the floor and selling wine to guests and cultivating wine programs. So I can't give you the LeBron answer, but as far as influence and positivity for the wine business and shaping the wine culture in Hawaii, the answer is Chuck. No questions asked.
Then that sounds like the Michael Jordan bet to me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and thanks for that. Honestly, thank you for that. Yeah, appreciate
and
that.
Another thing I love about Chuck is that Chuck has a love and respect and passion for the Central Coast of California. So I'm talking about those wine regions that you will find in Santa Barbara County, and San Luis Obispo County, and Monterey County. And unfortunately, in the world of, if there's a totem pole of respect for American wine regions, not every sommelier would pay the same regard to those regions that Chuck has paid. And you see that when you go to restaurants here. You'll see an abundance of Central Coast wines that you would not see elsewhere if you were at a restaurant in, say, Houston or in Portland, Oregon. And that's Chuck. Chuck made friends there and saw the potential of those wine regions as they were coming up, as they were new, as they were the frontier, and planted some flags with some winemakers there. And that's the reason, like, for example, like Jim Clendenin of A Bon Clement, one of the pioneers of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir production in Santa Barbara County, has such a following here in Hawaii and does custom labels for Alan Wong's and for Roy's, because Chuck brought those wines to Hawaii and said, "Hey, there's something really cool going on in Santa Barbara County. It's new, it's developing, check it out." And 30 years later, we're still enjoying those wines at a disproportionate level compared to our other fine wine markets.
Mm-hmm. Lance had a couple of questions. Now that we're talking about, where grapes are grown, and we're talking about like Santa Barbara and Napa. Lance, you had a couple of questions about that I couldn't answer about Napa.
Yeah, well,
right?
So watching, it got me, or
Shock.
Yeah, it got me really interested in that. So I watched the movie The California Wines Win, and I look at the history of competitions that happened after, and it seems like the American wines won all of them, or at least the ones on Wikipedia that kind of followed that structure. So what's your take on why these American wines, I guess Napa Valley or American wines in general, are winning these competitions? Are they better in your opinion, or why are they winning?
That is a loaded question, very loaded, and very tricky and difficult to navigate, because we're going to get into the politics of flavor profile.
Okay.
And you're going to get into the Parkerization of winemaking and the Michel Rolland influence in winemaking. It sounds like someone just started a van.
Yeah.
Okay. Now
okay. So how about coming?
But I'll get into it.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So many would say, and myself included, that there were two factors at play there. For one, there may have been complacency among French winemakers. meaning that a lot of the cellar practices had room for improvement. Let's put it that way. What they did in California is the weather in Napa is more consistent and more reliable than the weather in Burgundy and the weather in Bordeaux. The struggle in Burgundy and the struggle in Bordeaux, especially during these times and leading up to 1970s, 1980s, is to achieve ripeness. They struggle to achieve ripeness of the grapes. And in Napa, that's not a problem. You can achieve ripeness every day, every year. And so with that, the wines in Napa, when put against wines from France, were more immediately enjoyable because there was more ripeness. So they had potentially slightly higher alcohol levels, higher levels of extraction, and were more obvious. The flavors were more obvious. And in a blind tasting, when you're looking at what is better, what do I like more right now, the California wines are going to, quote unquote, jump out of the glass. Does that mean they have more nuance? Does that mean they have more ageability? Does that mean they express terroir? No. It means they are more immediately enjoyable. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean that to sound left-handed at all. But in a blind tasting environment, if you're looking at what do I like right now, I'm not surprised that California wines were able to immediately please the taster.
Right. Yep.
And then carry that forward. Let's take I'm not going to pick on anyone, but there's a marquee Napa Cabernet. It's one of the marquee wines, one of the more popular Napa Cabernets. If you look at their wines from the 90s, they're 12.5 alcohol. If you look at them now, they're 14.5.
Huh.
And that is
over how many years did that take place?
It started, Carl, with the 1997 vintage in Napa. That was the year that changed everything. That was like the second change. You had your Spurrier tasting in Paris, 1977, right? And then the 1997 vintage in Napa. And there are those now that.
So you're saying? I was going to say, so it's by design. Like this is how they have decided to create their wine.
Yes, so they can sell their wine. So Robert Parker, the wine writer and Marlboro Red smoker from Baltimore, really likes ripe, opulent, over-the-top wines. And the 1997 vintage in Napa was a ripe, over-the-top vintage. And he came out pounding the drum saying, this is what good wine tastes like. And I'm going to give these wines 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100 points. And the wine consumer, in the throes of the dot-com boom, responded. And winemakers that weren't in on the party looked around and said, wait a minute, my wine did not get 98 points. I'm not able to double my price. I don't have people knocking down my door.
Right.
I'm going to look over the fence. What did they do? Oh, they let their fruit hang longer till the sugar went through the roof. Mm-hmm. They let their wine go straight into brand new oak barrel to give it that Christmassy, spicy flavor. And they got 98 points. And they're able to sell their wine and buy a nice new Mercedes. I'm going to do that too.
Can I ask you something, Dan? Okay.
Sure.
Novice like me, right? And this is something I've asked Carl before, but or I asked Carl that I was going to ask you. From a novice point of view, I don't have the palate where I can taste the nuances and this and that. I more or less, I just want the flavorful, good wine. Would you say that like a Napa Valley wine might be the one that I should probably go for, at least in the beginning, because the flavor is so, I guess, like sharp and out there?
That's a tricky one because, I mean, Napa's a big place and there are hundreds and hundreds of wines. And I don't mean to dodge your question there, Lance.
Yeah, no, I understand.
What I like to do when I'm getting someone into wine is I like to ask them questions about what kind of flavors do they enjoy. A common one would be like, do you like Skittles or dark chocolate?
Oh, okay. I got it.
And then I'm going to take them down that path. So Lance, Skittles or dark chocolate?
I like both, but I'll go with dark chocolate.
You like dark chocolate? Okay. How about steak or lamb?
Steak.
Okay, okay. So now I've got you. I'm thinking of a domestic Merlot. I'm going that direction. Something that's going to have some leafy spice, but still some fruit for you to enjoy. Not entirely stemmy, like if we went to Bordeaux wine from France, where there's going to be a stronger leafiness to it, more leafy green flavors. But I'm thinking you may not want something that's super ripe and over the top. And then we'll go
Right.
from there. So to answer your question, starting in Napa is, of course, a great place to start because there's tremendous variety.
Mm-hmm.
And because the price points those wines command, there is an expectation and a dedication to quality.
Wow.
That if you're going to put Napa Valley on your label, you've spent money on land and you've spent money on fruit.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of the most expensive, it's some of the most valuable agricultural land on the planet.
Oh, so basically it's just a good place to start, and then you can like dive deeper into it.
Yeah, but you're going to pay for it. It's not the best value, but you're going to pay for it. It costs money.
Got it.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I was trying to explain that earlier this morning, Dale. So it's like, yeah, if we're talking about like the price of wine, but what are you paying for? It's not that it's better. It's like you're paying for the land and everything that it took to grow all of those things. It's kind of like the labor, right, behind it. Not trying to oversimplify it.
No, for sure. But honestly, Lance, I would encourage you to start in France, and I'll tell you why. The world of wine globally is a wheel that spins off of France. Now, the Italians will tell you that the Romans taught winemaking to the French, and to that I'll say, okay, that was a long time ago, and the French have run with it, and they're in good shape. When you look at winemaking anywhere else in the world, anywhere, I don't care where you are, if you're in Chile, if you're in Spain, if you're in what's that silly little island, Tasmania, off the coast of Australia, they are taking their cues from France. You can't say that about Italy. You can't say that about Spain. You can't say that about Germany. Now, that doesn't mean that you could go to Oregon and you would find someone who is trying to make really world-class Riesling in the by the example set forth by the Germans. That certainly exists. Of course it does. But that's one. Down the street are 50 other people taking their cues from France. So when you look at our grape varietals, that you look at you go to your wine list at your restaurant, or you walk down the halls of Fujioka's or Tamura's, you see Pinot Noir, French. Chardonnay, French. You see Cabernet Sauvignon, French. You say Malbec, French, right? Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, there may be one weirdo making Sangiovese in California, taking a cue from the Italians. Yay for you. But mathematically, it's the French who are running this program, and there's for good reason. They have 1,000-year head start on anybody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you go to Burgundy and look at how that beautiful small place has been divided up into little tiny sections, to where a section the size of my backyard has its own name, and the fruit grown there will give you a wine that tastes different than the fruit grown, a kilometer down the road or 50 feet down the road. Nowhere else in the world has that.
Yeah.
Because the French had 1,000 years to get it dialed in, and the monks that made wine in Burgundy identified those little differences. Jeez. And then it's not just Burgundy. You travel 100 miles south into the Rhone, and you see how different the soil is from one parcel in Gigondas to the next, because the stratification of the soil there is vertical instead of horizontal. It's incredible. And then you travel even further to the south, you get the Mediterranean, and you get the Bandol, and they're making this incredible rosé, and the soil is different there, and different grapes grow, and they're able to make these different kinds of wines. And we've only done a day trip in the car, and we've seen an incredible variety in what those wines can be and what the earth can give, what the earth can channel an expression through how these grapes are grown. There's no one else has that. And that's why the world of wine takes that influence from France.
Yeah.
So Lance, go to France. Start in France.
I've been there a few times. I've never left the city, but I guess I'm missing a lot. Well, now, I mean, I am genuinely interested in wine. It's just a whole world to take in. I'm in baby steps right now.
Yeah. And with that said, I know one of Lance's more burning questions was a guide to beginners, potentially on a date or in a social gathering. Because Dan, obviously you have like just this wealth of knowledge, technically and historically speaking, about wine and the grapes. And, later on, I do want to ask, what you think about Cabernet, just because it's the most planted grape in the world. I mean, is it the cheat grape? But we'll get into that later. Lance, in his starter guide to like asking about wine in restaurants, like how do you, what was your question? Let's use this. How do you sound like you know what you're talking about? How do you feel? How can you feel confident when asking for a wine, maybe a bottle, for a table of guests, without sounding pretentious or right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're looking
date
to ask, right?
or a gathering with people. What should I ask, or what should I order, or what's the process you think in order to look somewhat knowledgeable but not look like a noob, if that makes sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. So there's a little trick that any skilled wine steward or your average server at a restaurant with a legitimate wine program should be dialed in on, Lance. And here's what you do. In your mind, you should know what you want to spend. And in my opinion, at a restaurant, given the markup they need to take, if you want something of note, you're going to want to start around $70 to $80.
Okay.
For a bottle of wine, which sounds like a lot, but there's 5 glasses of wine in there, and now we're running around paying $15, $18 for a cocktail. It's not that
makes
bad.
sense.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
So, Lance, here's what you do. You get your wine list, and you find a bottle of wine. It doesn't matter what it is. That's at the price point you want.
Mm-hmm.
The steward comes over. You say, I'm enjoying the lamb. My date is having the escargot. And I had something like this in mind. And you point at the wine that is a price point that you want to pay.
Okay.
I had something like this in mind. Could you guide us, please? He or she say, okay, he wants to spend $90 on a bottle of wine. They're ordering these 2 things. I'm going to point them towards something that's in that price point, but that fits what they're ordering. That's the trick. That's the wink. So you don't say, I only want to spend $90. What's good?
Right.
I
love that. I love that.
I'm here to help.
Right.
Now, what if you want to talk about your choice? How would you be able to talk about what you've chosen? Like, if your table has said, "Oh, that's interesting. Why do we go with that?" How do you talk about your choice
with your date?
Yeah, or as a group of people, once the coast is clear, obviously, right? Once we're able to like not be outside and freely like just breathe each other's air inside a restaurant.
Before Dan answers, I would just go to the restroom and Google what I just ordered. Dan, come back with like there's a wealth of this was a 19 whatever. Yeah. Anyways,
I would go with Lance. Yeah, I mean, if you try to bullshit, you're gonna get caught, Carl. I mean, come on. I don't know anything about wine. That's why I asked the guy who knows. How's the weather?
See,
I had a
there you go. There you go. Easy.
My friend, he's gonna listen to this, but we've been friends since middle school, and for my 30th birthday, we went to Vegas, and he went to Napa Valley once. Okay, like a couple months before this trip. So we're at STK, the steakhouse, and he came off like he was a master sommelier, and it was so annoying. He was like, I think he's a little drunk too, but he was just like making stuff up, and he's talking with the sommelier like he knows everything. And I always picture that, and I'm like, I cannot ever be that guy. I don't ever want to be that guy.
Well, yeah, and no one likes a phony,
Yeah.
And I'm with you on that one. It's and that can be really irritating in any area of life, not just wine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, that gets back to what I was talking about with Chuck Furia, which is I really like his tableside manner, and that let's invite you to participate in the world of wine instead of shaming you for not being here already. That's my whole thing.
Yeah. there was a time. I'm going to want to say it's maybe 2000. God, just like 2002, 2003, when that mentality started changing. Because for a long time, you held this. If you knew something about wines, then it's sort of like you walked a little bit higher, right? It's kind of like being a vegan today. It's just like, I'm better than you, right? It's like I'm a little bit more knowledgeable than you, and I'm a little bit, so they can be a little more snooty, if you will, about their knowledge of wine. And then that changed. The perception had to change, especially in the food and beverage industry. So my guess is like around early 2000s, because it was pushing people away. This whole, I don't know, putting it up on a pedestal, the airs that people get when it comes to their knowledge of wine.
Certainly. It was seen. I mean, there's that expression, right? You've got champagne taste on a beer budget or whatever.
I like that.
And I think it comes from the fact that wine, as compared to other alcohol, is seemingly more expensive. So therefore, it was enjoyed in nice restaurants, and people with money had it. So if you knew about wine, so therefore you must have exposure to higher achieving individuals or families with generational wealth. Otherwise, how could you possibly know anything about wine? And therefore, if you don't know of anything about wine, then you're the hors polloi, right? So, and I'm glad that changed, because I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times: wine is fermented grape juice, and if you're a jerk about it, you're a jerk. It's that simple.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget that. And anyone that gives you a hard time is just an asshole. And I got no time for people like that. But I'm in the world of selling wine. I want more people to drink wine. I want people to buy wine. So I do have some skin in the game, right?
Right.
And the more people drinking wine, whether you're having a canned wine with your burger, or you're having a beautiful bottle of wine on an anniversary or a special occasion, great. And that's what's great about wine, is the depth is there. You can find a bottle of wine that's enjoyable for $9.99 on the shelf at Samura's. It can be done. And if that's your alcohol for the evening, great. And then if that leads you into, on the 21st birthday of your firstborn, having something really spectacular to open, great. You can enjoy it. What I'm trying to say is, you can enjoy wine at the beach, and you can enjoy it on the greatest, most special day of your life.
I love that.
There you go. I think that answered a lot of questions too, because, I know, the perception is just like anything that we spend our money on. You naturally think the higher the price, the better it's going to be. But then, we have to go back and define that word better. What does better mean? Right. And what you're saying is, you can find delicious things at every end of the spectrum. How do you go about finding them?
That's the hardest thing anywhere in life, right? So I believe it's good to have a relationship with a wine retailer. And whether you like to shop at Fujioka's or Tamura's or Vintage Wine Cellar or Our Field, there are people there that cultivate those shelves. And that's not to say you can't find a nice bottle of wine at Safeway. You certainly can. But there's no one there working the aisles who's going to help you and remember you from last time. Right. But if you go to any of our independent, over on Big Island, you got some great options. You got 4 awesome options on Big Island. You've got 3 or 4 really good options over on Kauai, on Maui. There are people that cultivate this. And you go in and they'll remember you. Oh, hey, Carl, welcome back. How did you like that, whatever you bought last time? Oh, I really enjoyed it. I want to go deeper with that producer. I want to go deeper in that region. Or no, what, I didn't like that. It was a bit too sour for my taste, or it was a little too rich for my taste. Okay, well, let's go this way this time. And that's how I started. And I remember, this was 1998. I was in Austin, Texas. I was 24, 25 years old, and I shopped at Grapevine Market, and my guy there, his name was Lee. And he remembers me. His name was...
remember his name?
If he walked in the room and said, "Hi, Lee, how are you?" I remember him like the back of my hand. And he oh, hey, guys, welcome back. How did you like that Bareboat Pinot? It was great, Lee. Thank you. What else do you have like that? Why don't you try it this time? Why don't you try this one this time? And you go from there. And my wife and I would write it down and save labels, and there was a wine log and all this and that. And that's how you start. So you need to have a relationship with someone who knows what they're talking about and is fun and will listen and remember you. And that's very easy to have, because guess what? Anyone who's working in wine retail has surrendered the option of having a lucrative lifestyle. There's not a lot of money to be made.
They're passionate about it.
They're in for the love of the game, Lance. That's why they're there.
That's awesome.
And you develop that relationship and just start. I've got $20. I want something that's great. I'm making a steak. Okay, here you go. Boom. Come back next week and you build from there.
I've had only one. So I've been to 3 or 4 wine tastings ever. And 2 of them were at a place called Hazard. Have you guys been there?
Of course.
I'm sure you guys have
been.
Hazard,
yeah.
But yeah. And the gentleman there is amazing. The first time I went with a couple of coworkers, and I was totally, I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was gonna be over my head. And he did exactly what you've been talking about. He kind of told you a little bit about the history, and kind of lowered the walls. And then, kind of like what you said earlier, it just fermented grape juice. He made it just a lot less, a lot more approachable, and he made it really enjoyable. Actually, really enjoyable.
Yeah, great. Great folks like that who actually sell wine and do it well. They're able to take the pretense out of it and make you feel at ease. Like, oh, I know I can follow you. I can follow along what you're laying down, and I don't feel like a dummy. Now I can actually sit down and just and drink it and taste it for what it is.
Exactly so. And if you find yourself liking Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa, well, then you can retrace its roots to Bordeaux, or you can see, okay, well, what else are they doing with Cabernet Sauvignon in the Central Coast? What are they doing with Cabernet Sauvignon in Washington? What are they doing with Cabernet Sauvignon in South America or Australia? Or you can stay in Napa and say, okay, well, what else are they growing in Napa? I like Rutherford. Okay, what is Merlot like? Oh, they grow Syrah there. Wow, that's interesting. So you can go down the rabbit hole of the grape variety, Lance, or you can explore a region, because those are going to be your 2 variables that your wine pivots on: the grape varietal, and then where it's grown. Start there, and then you get into the nuance of winemaking and all this and that, but that's later.
Yeah. Yeah, he was great. He took you on a mini journey of where the wine was from and how it was made without getting too much into detail, and I thought it was fantastic. Dan, great. I've learned so much. I got to continue it. Maybe when we have you on again, hopefully it's in person if we can, but if we have you on again, I'll have more intelligent questions to ask, because I'll know more about what I'm asking.
No, this was a great conversation. I really appreciate you guys inviting me. It's an honor. It's my first podcast, so this is exciting for me. Thank you for that. And we didn't even talk about movies.
Who's Robert Kamen?
Go for it.
Kamen is a Hollywood screenwriter, and he made his name. Somehow he lucked his way into doing this. He wrote the script, or he did the screenwriting. So the adaptation from script into the screenplay. He's a screenplay writer for Taps, that early Tom Cruise movie. And he then went on and he did a lot of those Taken movies. He wrote the screenplays for those. Yeah, he's a big Hollywood screenplay writer. Anyway, he bought the rights to the Gergich story, which is the Spurrier tasting in Paris. He bought the rights to Mike Gergich's story, and has been developing this movie for 15 years. In the middle of that, Bottle Shock came out, and Robert, I knew Robert at the time because he has a winery in Sonoma, Cayman Vineyards. They make huge, over-the-top Cabernet Sauvignon and Syrah. I was emailing with him. This was years ago. This was 08, 09. And I said, hey, Bottle Shock came out. What do you think? And I tried to find the email for you guys. It's long gone. It's probably 3 computers ago. He went off on that movie is a bunch of bullshit. They didn't include Michael Gergich. They changed all the details. They did not tell the story, and they didn't tell the story because I own the rights to the real story. And someday the real movie is going to come out about Mike Gergich, who was an immigrant who turned the whole wine industry on its ear. And Robert Kamen, I'll notice also, is the only person in my life I've ever spoken to that had marijuana breath. Not smoke. He when you talk to him, it tastes like he's chewing on marijuana all the time.
I want to interrupt real quick. That movie, I felt Alan Rickman saved that movie in my opinion. I told Carl this morning. I watched it last night in preparation for this. I felt like that movie didn't do the story any justice. I think it was slow and like just not a great movie. And then you read about what happened. I'm like, man, they could have done better. I feel.
I agree with you. I thought it was a crappy movie. I think it did more disservice than service to the people, those pioneers in California, that really Marty Winiarski, right, the guy from Chicago, Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. The real story was lost, and it was like a crappy movie that maybe you would enjoy on a flight to Cleveland, but that's it. It's
exactly
not great.
Just
cinema.
To waste time.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
And it's unfortunate because the point that Robert Kamen was trying to make is there's such a great story to be told, and they blew it. They missed it. And he's like, someday I will make the film that tells the real story. So I'm Lance, I hate to say this, I'm glad you didn't like the movie.
No, I was telling Carl, I was like, the love story is like super weird. There was a lot of storylines that kind of didn't make sense, or they didn't end or begin well, and then the whole point about the wine, I felt like they did a whole disservice to something that was such a big deal. I felt, and without Alan Rickman, I would have. I thought about stopping the movie halfway, but I was like, oh no, there's going to be some kind of cool part, and it never really came up until the end when they won. But you kind of knew that was going to happen.
Well, and also some of that just didn't happen, about him being at work at the bank, and all of a sudden the wine goes clear. The tar tights fall out, and he's like, oh look. No, that didn't happen. So
is the movie, is your friend, is Robert Kamen, is he making the movie or planning on actually telling the real story?
Well, we're not in contact anymore. He was a colleague at the time, so I couldn't call him a friend. That'd be wrong. I don't know. I mean, I in preparation for this, I did a quick look to see how that's going. And the last news article about this film in wine business was like dated 2015. So who knows?
And then, of course,
yeah, exactly. So who knows where it's going?
COVID.
So I mean, I don't know, but I mean, it's been a project for over a decade to tell this story.
It needs to be told in a way that gives it. I mean, I read that the bottle, the original Chateau Montelena. Yeah, Montelena. It's actually in the Smithsonian. One of the bottles from the first taste testing, because it's like such a big deal.
Oh, it's huge.
And and they made this awful movie. It has like a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I think that's generous.
And I think that's high. Yeah, exactly.
Lance,
it was a terrible.
The real
movie.
story is, just read The Judgment of Paris. It's a well-written book, and it tells the whole story of the people that made those incredible wines that changed history and really legitimized American winemaking. That's the
Judgment of Paris.
Yeah, that's the book to read. Yeah.
All right, I got that. Judgment of Paris. Carl, are you still there? Oh, okay. It's funny.
Yeah, I'm still here.
No, this
is great.
I saw the movie and I was excited about it. I don't always believe in Rotten Tomatoes, but I'll look at the Rotten Tomatoes score before I watch a movie just to kind of gauge, like if it's like 0%, I'm probably not going to watch it. But if it's like I'm going off track, but like Dumb and Dumber has like a 20%, and I think that's totally blasphemous. That movie should have like a 100, but I get it. But this movie had a 43%. I'm like, maybe people don't like wine. And I watched it and I was like, man, this is the exact opposite from how cool Sour Grapes was. Sour Grapes really got me into wine because I was fascinated with how much you said you got halfway through it, but like the main guy, how much he knew about a certain thing that he could fool other people. I thought that was pretty amazing.
There's a book about that too. It's Millionaire's Vinegar.
I like that.
Yeah,
That's such a good name.
it focuses a lot on
It's a good title.
The Thomas
Good
Jefferson
title.
wines.
Oh, are those the one? I think that was in the movie where they. If correct me if I'm wrong, because so in the movie Sour Grapes, they one of the Koch brothers, I don't know, Koch, yeah, the Koch brothers in Florida. He spent like I want to say $500,000 on Thomas Jefferson wines or one of those guys back then, and then they found out they were all fake. Is that what it's about?
It's yes, correct, and it's
Yeah.
You get into for me those are the real experts, those people that assess auctions and auction lots. Those
Yeah.
are the real experts to be able to like test the glue and the capsule and the paper and to know that so and so did not bottle magnums in that year to find those counterfeits. That
was amazing. Yeah, I mean there was one where they mentioned in the movie they were like, oh, one of the labels was using Elmer's glue, but Elmer's glue wasn't invented till 1940 something, and they're like, this was supposed to be bottled in 1920. I was like, wow, that is amazing. No, I was going to say that was amazing that there's like forensic people for bottles of wine.
Oh man, that's a whole new series. I got to pitch it.
But that's a real deal. Like a friend of mine for many years was the cellar master for Hart Davis Hart, which outside of Sotheby's was the biggest wine auction house, and they're based in Chicago, Carl. And he would tell stories of what would happen, like in the middle of an auction. They'd have wines up there. What do they call that? What's the word for that in the auction? Where they on the auction block, I guess, where like in an auction, a cork would fall down into the wine while it's being displayed vertically, and then the whole lot is called into question. Was this wine stored properly? What is the provenance of this wine? And it is serious because there are major dollars on the line. Major. And then a friend of mine, a Somali in Chicago, who bought for a restaurant group, bought a lot of wine through auction and has great stories about the phantom bidders online and where this money is coming from, and how we've seen just this incredible escalation of wine prices at auction for no reason other than people want what they can't have.
That makes sense. I mean, I remember. So I've watched Sour Grapes now 3 times, and one of the things that the main guy Rudy was doing is apparently not only was he making fake wines, and that's eventually his downfall, but he was buying tons of wine in order, I guess, to make his own wines more rare, I guess, and to kind of make them seem greater or something like that. But apparently he had changed the whole wine auction industry, or at least at the time, because he was just purely buying up everything.
Well, it's a smart idea. You buy it all so you know how to fake it, and then you corner the market. You take everything that's legit out of the marketplace and then reintroduce the fake. It's not that complex, but it's genius.
Right. No, it was genius. And I mean, it's kind of weird that documentary got me into it, because I realized how, and no, it's so funny because it got me so into the complexity of wine. When all these people that were frauded by him, they were like Hollywood directors and celebrities and all these rich people, and they're sitting there and they're saying, I've had the real thing before, and I know the complexities. Wine from Rudy, and it was the same, or it was the same enough. It fooled them, and I was like, man, if you can take it, if you are as knowledgeable as he is about how you can make a formula of cheaper wines and make this wine, that's amazing. I mean, he's obviously talented. And then I got more into it. I was like, wow, there's a whole complex world of wine. It's not just a drink, an expensive drink. There's much more to it. And then I kind of got into it and started reaching out to Carl and another coworker about wine, and Still a novice, but this is helpful for sure.
Well, Lance, we welcome you. Another good one to watch would be it's called Red Obsession. Strangely enough, who's the narrator? Russell Crowe is the narrator in this documentary. I don't know why.
Red Obsession.
Yeah.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, it's about.
I've seen this. You know what's funny is I've seen this thumbnail before. I didn't know it was about wine. I thought it was a horror movie. I just never. I've seen it. I didn't put two and two together. I thought it was like vials of blood. I don't know. It just came across.
That's a good one too, about how it's really, I mean, it walks very carefully without like being negative or positive, but about how the awakening of wine culture in China has changed the wine game internationally. Like basically a new player came to the party and they play for keeps and they've changed everything.
That's so funny that you say that, because I'm a huge car guy, like huge into any type of car. And when there's a lot of companies, Rolls-Royce, BMW, a lot of their sales, especially the really high-end cars, the Maybachs and stuff like that, a lot of their sales come from China. And I think it kind of correlates to this, because now they're making cars that are only made for China. So they'll take like a BMW 7 Series and they'll make it longer, because that's a status symbol in China to have longer cars. It doesn't even, I mean, as long as a Maybach or Rolls-Royce, and it's only sold in China, and China's now their number one client. It's not North America anymore. And that's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because I can imagine that for wine, in that they have all this money. How do you show it, more or less?
And it's interesting also in that, you know, if you look at American culture, the United States of America was established by European settlers, you know, so we're talking about Thomas Jefferson as a wine collector. So wine has been a thing for us since the beginning, whereas the same cannot be said for China. So it's new to the culture. And I have picked up on some resentment in the wine business about how the Chinese don't enjoy their wine right, or they'll buy Lafite and mix it with Coca-Cola and take shots. You hear these stories, and it's nothing more than wine racism. No. You know, if they bought the wine, they can do what they want. There are no rules.
Exactly.
Do what you want.
Right.
But there's a funny scene in that movie where there's a guy who made $1 billion selling dildos, and it's him sitting in a room full of fake dicks with his Lafite. It's great. It's great.
Wait, is this in China? This is in China, or
in China? Yeah, he's the Pablo Escobar of dildos in China, and he's got all this money. And he's got his Lafite. He's talking about how he made all his money and he spent it on wine simply because he has the money. He's like, I don't even really. Yeah,
hey,
he's like, I'm not.
Money's money, right?
I'm not even sure that I'm really gonna drink the wine. I don't care, but I can buy it because I have all this money.
I mean, yeah, I can see if the purists, I don't know what you call them, if the purists are like, oh, you're not drinking it right, but you're right. I mean, they spent their money, they're helping the wine industry, which is in part helping them. Let them do whatever they want.
Yeah, it's in the same thing too. I mean, you run into that wine racism too, where like, you know, where you can't pair wine with Chinese food, or you can't pair wine with Japanese food or Indian food. That's simply not true. It doesn't follow the traditional lines of European cooking. Right. That you may be used to or more familiar with. That doesn't mean anything more than that.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know there was wine racism based upon like the food.
Wow. There's wine racism too. Like wine buyers, I'm not going to buy Pinot Noir from Chile. Why would I do that? What do they know about making Pinot Noir? But they'll you know, bend over backwards to buy the newest, hottest thing from Sonoma. Well, Sonoma has a 25-year head start on Chile. In the world of wine, that's not very much. It's very little, you know. So it's interesting. There's a lot of politics and a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Biases toward or favoring certain wineries or certain regions.
I think that's the probably the main reason, or one of the reasons why I want to be knowledgeable, is I don't want to have that bias. I don't, you know, if I'm in a store and the wine from Chile is actually better, but I don't know any better, and I'm just like, I'm just gonna get the French stuff because they make, you know, they're known for wine. I want to be able to look at it and say, this one is cheaper, but it's actually better. I think that's where I want to get. I'm not necessarily looking for like super high knowledge. I just kind of want to know what I'm getting into, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a great pursuit, but I still believe starting in France is the place to start. But you may very well end up somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But start in France.
No, it makes sense. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I know, when you, when you go out and when people talk about wine, you just don't want to sound like the bovo at the table who knows nothing.
I'll leave you with this, guys. Don't ever say Pinot Noir.
I would never.
A bunch of dopes.
What's the right way to say it, though?
I don't know who says that.
I just say Pinot because I don't know how to say the second part correctly.
See, here's the thing. It's a French word, right? And I don't speak French. Mm-hmm. But when you're in France, I say Pinot Noir. But I'm from Illinois. I don't say those things. So I hear people that say that, and then I challenge them, like, okay, well then how do you pronounce Tempranillo? How do you pronounce? Why are you saying Merlot instead of Merlot? Don't be a dope.
Right.
Just say, if you're gonna say one of the French words, say all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You focus on noir for some reason. Why are we doing this? Why are you wasting my time?
I know. Then you probably have to say with every word that was of a different language. Like, hey, you guys want to go out for some tapas?
We have American English pronunciations for foreign words.
Yeah.
Karaoke is a great example, right? And so don't be
correct. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dan, I wanted to say thank you so much for this, because not only did you give us like just a wealth of knowledge, you gave me more information. I'm like, oh my God, I got to look this up. I have so many notes right now in front of me, which is why I was quiet for such a long time. I'm like, I got to look that up. I got to download that on my Kindle. I have to. So thanks for being such a great guest and being funny and, rekindling some of our past memories together. But also, being a fun advocate for the industry and for some of our colleagues.
It's been my pleasure.
In the wine industry as well.
Very,
so
very
we appreciate that.
I enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Well, once again, thanks to Dan Fullick for all the nostalgia, as well as sharing his stories and his love of wine. And what do we got next? On the next Real Parallels, you're going to hear how a young, scrappy artist turned industrial areas all over the world into his own living art gallery. Jasper Wong on the next Real Parallels.